Hello, economics students, and welcome to a new semester and a new class, a class that you have never had to take before, and that, of course, is economics, a brand new subject to you. And since this is a subject that you've never had to take a class in before, I think it makes sense to start with the basics, and that would be to define what economics actually is. So if I were to ask you, what is economics? How would you answer that question? Well, if you think about it, some of you may answer it like this. Economics is the study of money. Economics is all about money. That's a reasonable answer to give, but it's an incorrect answer. Money is not economics, and economics is not the study of money either. Money is actually a tool of economics, but it is not in and of itself what economics is all about. It's just a tool. Some of you may have heard before a term supply and demand. Okay, does that sound familiar? Supply and demand. And you might say, well, economics is the study of supply and demand. Again, that would be a reasonable thing to answer, but not a correct thing. Supply and demand is actually a tool, or better yet, it's a model that we can use to predict a type of economic behavior. But again, supply and demand deals with one element of economics, and it is one model of many that is used in economics in order to predict the way people will act in certain situations. Okay, so rather than beat around the bush anymore, let's just take a look at the official definition that we're going to use in this class. Now, I will step back and say that there are multiple definitions of economics. You can take 5 textbooks and you might get 5 different definitions, but I believe that there is one that pretty much encompasses the entire element of this subject, and this is going to be the definition that we use. Economics is a social science that studies how people, individually or in groups, use scarce resources to satisfy their needs and wants. Now, that's a lot to say there, and it is, by the way, this is a definition I want you to know. I want you to remember this definition, okay? Because you will see this again in your future. But let's break this down a little bit, okay? There's a lot here, and I think it's worth breaking down this definition into its different parts, and that will help us understand what economics is all about a little bit better. First of all, economics is a social science. It is a science, okay? And by that we mean that it uses the scientific method to predict behaviors, okay? So, what's the scientific method? If you take, biology or chemistry or, any of the sciences that are taught in our school, they all use the scientific method. They define a purpose or a question that needs to be answered. They formulate a hypothesis that can explain the question or the problem. They test the hypothesis. If you're in, chemistry, you're going to do some experiments to test the hypothesis in the lab, okay? You analyze the results of your tests. And if the test didn't work out the way that you thought it would to explain the hypothesis, then you make modifications to either the test to figure out what you did wrong in the test, or you modify your hypothesis, okay? And then if the test or experiment does validate the hypothesis, then you report your findings. That's the scientific method, and economics uses the scientific method as well. Now, what are we trying to answer here? Economics is a social science, okay? It is not a physical science. It's not a life science. It is a social science. So what does that mean when we say social science? Well, the social sciences are looking at various elements of human behavior, okay? A social science deals with human behavior. Our school teaches several social sciences in addition to economics. Sociology is a social science dealing with the behavior of how people in large groups interact with one another. Psychology is a social science dealing with how the mind impacts the behavior of an individual or a group, perhaps. History is a social science, okay, looking at how human societies have behaved in the past, okay? And there are others, anthropology, there are multiple social sciences, economics is just one of them. Now, what does economics do? It studies how people individually or in groups, use their scarce resources to satisfy needs or wants. Now, you want to write this down. If we're looking at individual economic behavior, then we're talking about something called microeconomics. Micro, M-I-C-R-O. Microeconomics looks at the behavior of individual human beings or individual business enterprises. Okay, so if I want to look at, the behavior of a single company, that is also microeconomics, just as the behavior of a single individual is microeconomics. Okay, or we look at group behaviors. When we're looking at economic behavior of a large group, then we're talking about macroeconomics, M-A-C-R-O, macroeconomics. Here, by large group, what we really typically mean is the economic behavior of a country, or even the globe, or a group of countries. That's macroeconomics. It could also be the economic behavior of an industry, okay? So it could be the economic behavior of the telecommunications industry, or the oil industry, petroleum industry, or the automobile industry. There's lots of different companies within those industries. So when we're not looking at the economic behavior of just one of those companies, but of the whole industry, that would be macroeconomics, as it is when we're looking at the economic behavior of, say, the United States of America. Again, that's macroeconomics. And we look at how these groups use scarce resources. Scarcity is a major element of economics. We're going to spend the entire day tomorrow really looking at scarcity, okay? But let's just for now suffice it to say that we can't get everything we want, that our resources are scarce, okay? They are not unlimited, they are finite, okay? So we have to find ways to deal with the scarcity, with the fact that resources are not unlimited, that they are in fact quite limited. And then we use these resources to satisfy our needs and our wants, okay? What's the difference between a need and a want? Well, a need is something that you have to have in order to live. Basically, when we're talking about needs, we're talking about food, water, clothing, and shelter. You have to have those things to live, okay? A want, on the other hand, you don't have to have to live, but the wants make your life more pleasant, more enjoyable. So, for example, I need shelter. I need some kind of a roof over my head. I do not need a mansion on National Avenue or on Spring Creek. There's some huge, beautiful mansions on Spring Creek Road. I don't need to live in a mansion. Those mansions do satisfy a need, though. The mansion itself is a want, but they satisfy my need for shelter. But so does a little grass hut, perhaps in the Amazon jungle, also satisfies my needs for shelter. So you can see the difference between needs and wants. I need food. I do not need a filet mignon steak. Okay, that's a want. All right, so we look here we have two pictures on this slide. On the left and on the right. On the left, you see a marketplace. That market is in the country of Belize in Central America. On the right, we see a large store, which happens to be a Myers store. Both of these institutions, the market in Belize and Myers store, I don't know if you call it a grocery store or a department store, they sell more than just groceries. They both are satisfying the same needs, but they do it in a different way. And I believe you would find that the Myers satisfies probably more wants than the marketplace in Belize does, but they both satisfy needs. So they're accomplishing the same thing, but in different ways. And economics will study how these two different institutions are accomplishing their goal. Okay, so that's basically what economics is all about. Now, the obvious question then is, why do I study it? How does it help my life? How does it make my life any better to know how these behaviors work? Okay, why is that something I need to know? And it's an important question, and I would say that the answer to that question gets to this photograph. What are these kids doing? Well, I don't know 100% sure, but I can make a pretty good educated guess that these children are in a very poor country in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're probably waiting in line for their next meal. They're probably waiting in line for those bowls that they're holding to be filled with rice. That would be my guess, and that's going to be their food today. They may be waiting in line for clean drinking water as well. We don't know. But we study economics because of people like this. We can make these people's lives better if we understand how economics works. How can we more efficiently meet their needs so that they don't have to stand in a line in the hot sun hoping to get their next meal? Okay? If you think about Africa at all, especially sub-Saharan Africa, and many people don't think about it at all, but if you do think about that part of the world, maybe this is what comes to mind to you. You might think about a place that's kind of a basket case where people are living on the brink of starvation or famine or malarial diseases that can kill them. And that exists in Africa. But Africa is also a great success story economically, because right now the fastest growing countries in the world economically, those countries whose wealth is accumulating and growing the quickest, most of those countries are in sub-Saharan Africa. They're starting off at a low point, granted. But what has happened in this part of the world is a great success story economically in many cases, because you have countries that over the last, say, 20, 30 years have done away with old economic systems that were not meeting their needs efficiently. And these countries have begun to replace old, inefficient economic systems with systems that work much, much better. And they've done that because the people that run these countries have learned economics, and they have learned how to more efficiently meet the needs of their citizens so that they're not always on the brink of starvation or famine. This is why we study economics. But we don't study economics just to help out these poor kids in Africa. We don't have to go all the way to the other side of the world to find problems like this that we can address in an economic way. Take a look at this picture, and what do you see? You see a tent over here for sure. There was probably a campfire right here, but this is not someone camping out, say, in Rock Cut State Park for enjoyment, is it? This picture that you see here was taken about 3 or 4 miles as the bird flies from where you're sitting, probably in your home or at school right now. This is taken near the Rock River, right here in Rockford, Illinois, in the floodplain of the Rock River, actually, and that tent there is the home of a homeless person right here in Rockford. Okay? We have desperately poor people in our country, whether it's in Rockford, New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, or some rural hamlet out in the middle of nowhere. And these people also can have their lives improved if we understand economic principles and apply them in such a way that we can make sure that at least the degree of homelessness in America is minimized, if not eliminated. We probably will never eliminate homelessness, but perhaps we can use economic principles to make it less likely that someone would find themselves in a situation where they have to live like the person that you see who lives here in this tent has to live. So that's why we study economics, and it really is a subject that we need to understand. It's a subject that can really, really, really make the lives of people better. And hopefully in this semester, you're going to learn some of those principles yourselves and be able to apply them in such a way that you will understand the kinds of things that we need to do as a society to make people's lives better, whether that's here in Rockford, Illinois, or in the poorest country in sub-Saharan Africa. There's a real purpose, and a good purpose, to learn economics. And with that, we're going to sign off for the day. And I'll tell you to always check Canvas to see if there's an assignment. I do not believe there is one today, but check Canvas just to make sure. All right? And we'll talk to you later.